Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place once filled with laughter and soft footsteps. Outside, the evening sunlight spilled in through the gauzy curtains, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor. The air was warm, still heavy from the late summer heat, and yet goosebumps traced her skin as she leaned against the edge of the kitchen counter, arms crossed tightly as if trying to contain something inside her chest. He stood only a few feet away, silent, his tall frame outlined by the light filtering through the back window. His shirt clung slightly to his shoulders from the walk they'd taken earlier, and the faint scent of sweat and aftershave still lingered in the air between them. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not at this hour. But neither of them had left. She tried to busy her hands with a coffee mug, rinsing it twice though it was already clean. He hadn't spoken since they came back. Maybe because words would only make things worse. Maybe because neither of them trusted what might come out. When she glanced at him again, his eyes were already on her. Calm. Focused. But something stirred there, unspoken, searching. She dropped her gaze immediately, heart thudding too loud in her chest. This wasn't a conversation. It was something else entirely. He stepped forward, just once. Not close enough to touch, but enough to make the space between them buzz. Her breath caught without permission. She hated how easily her body betrayed her. "I should go," he said, voice low and steady. But he didn't move. "You should," she whispered, her hands tightening around the edge of the counter. The silence returned, but now it pulsed, like a current pulling them both into something neither of them would name. The clock ticked softly. Somewhere outside, a sprinkler hissed to life. Then, just as he turned to leave, his hand brushed against hers, barely. A whisper of contact, skin on skin. But it was enough. Enough to remind her why she hadn't slept in days. Why her thoughts returned to that night, the one they never talked about. She didn't move. Neither did he. The touch lingered, then slowly fell away. He opened the door, paused, and glanced back. "I didn't mean for any of this." She met his gaze and gave the smallest nod. "Me neither." The door closed softly behind him. But the weight of everything unsaid stayed behind, echoing through the quiet like footsteps down a hall that led to nowhere. And still, she didn't move. She hadn't meant to let it begin. At first, it was just conversation. Quiet, harmless exchanges while her husband scrolled his phone in the living room or stayed late at work. The man next door, Daniel, had started helping with the garden after the storm had ruined her fence. One afternoon turned into several. Then came laughter. Then stories. Then silence that felt safer than speaking. The shift was slow, the kind that only makes sense when you look back. A dropped glove. A shared look over coffee. The first time he touched her back to steady her, just above the waist, warm and careful, something in her chest trembled. Tonight had only deepened that unraveling. As she stared at the door he had just walked out of, her mind wandered back to last week. She had been standing on the porch, arms crossed against the cool dusk air. Daniel had come to return a borrowed tool, but lingered. Their conversation turned personal, memories of old regrets, things they'd lost, things they'd never said out loud before. Then came the silence. He had reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She hadn't pulled away. His hand lingered, fingers trailing gently behind her ear. Her breath had hitched. And when he leaned slightly closer, just enough for her to feel the heat of him along her neck, she'd stepped back. Barely. Not because she didn't want it. But because she did. Even now, the memory made her stomach twist. Not with shame. With ache. She leaned against the counter, fingers trembling against the cold marble. How had something so small become something so loud inside her? Then, a buzz. Her phone, face down on the kitchen island, lit up. A message. She turned it over. I saw him leave. We should talk. M. Her heart dropped. M, her husband? Her friend? The neighbor? She stared at the screen, the weight of those words pressing into her ribs. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. The house, once quiet, now felt too quiet. Like it was holding its breath with her. And outside, the last light of day faded from the window. The guest room had always been quiet. Forgotten, almost. A place for folded linens, dusty books, and a twin-sized bed that never saw sleep. But tonight, it felt like a vault, holding in breaths, secrets, heat. He followed her in silently, not quite touching, but near enough that she could feel the space between their bodies collapse. The door clicked shut behind them, not locked, but closed. It felt louder than it should have. She stood still near the window, her back to him. Her fingers trembled slightly as they toyed with the edge of the curtain, pretending to adjust it. The tension sat heavy between them, a silent current neither dared name. I shouldn't be here, he murmured. She didn't turn around. You already are. That was all it took. Slowly, he stepped closer. Not in a rush, not like he had a plan. His hand rose, hesitated, then landed just lightly at her waist. Her breath caught. She didn't move away. The light from the hallway bled in through the crack beneath the door, casting a faint line across the wooden floor. Everything else was hushed, only the sound of her breathing, shaky and shallow, filled the room. She turned to face him. His eyes searched hers, uncertain. Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but no words came. He raised a hand, brushing his knuckles along her cheek, then tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, reverent. Almost afraid. She closed her eyes. His hand drifted to her shoulder, down her arm, before settling at her elbow. The fabric of her blouse rustled softly. She reached for his other hand without thinking, their fingers brushing, trembling, and then resting together, lightly interlaced. I think about it, he whispered. More than I should. Her eyes opened, wide and glassy. Me too. He leaned in slowly, pausing just before their foreheads touched. Lips only inches apart, breath shared, hearts in full sprint. His free hand slid up, resting gently at the curve of her back. Her body softened, swaying toward him. It could have happened. It almost did. But, knock knock. They jolted apart, breath caught, eyes still locked. A voice called through the door, her husband's. You in there? She stepped back, fast. Too fast. He took a step too, hands dropping to his sides. Yes, she managed to say, her voice barely steady. Just a minute. But nothing, not the knock, not the voice, not even the guilt, could erase the closeness that had just passed between them. It was already done. The morning light was too honest. It slipped through the blinds in pale slats, touching everything she wished it wouldn't, his shirt tossed on the chair, her blouse draped over the edge of the bed, the dent in the pillow where his head had rested for, she didn't want to know how long. The guest room felt colder now. Smaller. Like the air itself had changed shape. She sat on the edge of the bed, half-dressed, hair tousled and skin still warm with the memory of what had almost, or maybe did, happen. Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket, clutching it like a shield. Her back was to him. Behind her, he pulled his shirt on in silence, the fabric rustling like leaves underfoot. He hadn't said a word since they woke. But she felt him watching. Not with lust, not anymore, but with something heavier. Something harder to carry. She finally spoke, voice soft and raw. You don't regret it? He didn't answer right away. A chair scraped lightly as he sat down, somewhere behind her. I don't know what I feel right now, he said, his tone slow, careful. But I know it's not simple. She turned, just enough to look at him. His hair was still messy from sleep, his collar askew. His eyes met hers, full of everything they didn't say last night, everything they couldn't afford to say now. I keep thinking, she whispered, if he hadn't knocked, he cut in gently, but he did. Silence. Downstairs, the house had started to wake. She could hear the quiet clink of a spoon against a mug. Her husband. Making coffee. Like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't sitting here, drowning in the echo of something she couldn't name. She stood and began to button her blouse with shaky hands. I can't look at him the same way anymore. I don't think I can look at you the same way anymore, he said, almost like a confession. Her fingers paused on the last button. He stood too now, slowly, as if the gravity in the room had doubled. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, too close to pretend, too far to reach for comfort. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Tried again. What now? He stepped toward the door. We can't keep doing this, and with that, he left. The door clicked shut behind him, but the sound was final. Loud. Like something had just ended. Only she wasn't sure what. Because deep down, it didn't feel like an ending at all. Downstairs, everything looked the same. Coffee steam curled above a ceramic mug. The morning news played low on the TV. Her husband sat at the table, scrolling through his phone with a look of casual indifference. But everything felt different. She walked into the kitchen, shirt pressed, hair quickly fixed, a calm mask worn like armor. He looked up, smiled briefly, and went back to his screen. Nothing in his face gave anything away. Not suspicion. Not anger. Not knowing. Or maybe he was pretending. Like she was. She poured herself coffee with steady hands, but her chest was a storm. Behind her, she could feel eyes on her, not from her husband. From him. Daniel. He had come by to borrow something, again, and now stood just inside the open back door, talking politely with her husband. Laughing, even. She turned slightly. Their eyes met across the kitchen. And just like that, heat. His smile faltered the moment their gazes locked. It was small, barely there, but she saw it. That flicker of memory. Of guilt. Of wanting. She looked away too fast. Hey, her husband said casually, Daniel said you lent him that charger last week. Can you grab it from the bedroom? Her heart skipped. Daniel. Bedroom. The same space from last night. Sure, she replied, keeping her voice steady. She walked upstairs slowly, fingers curling against her palm as she entered the guest room. Everything had been straightened, bed remade, pillows fluffed, nothing to see. But the air still carried it. Him. She bent to open the drawer where the charger sat. Footsteps. She turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, alone now. His jaw was tight. He didn't suspect anything, did he? No, she whispered. Not yet. A long pause stretched between them. Then he asked, so that's it? We pretend nothing happened? She didn't answer. He stepped closer, voice low. Because I can't pretend. Not with you. Her breath hitched. Don't do this here. But he didn't leave. His voice dropped even lower. If you were mine, I wouldn't leave you staring at your coffee every morning like a ghost. The words hit harder than she expected. They weren't fair. But they were true. She opened her mouth, to push him away, to say something cruel, to end it, but the buzzing of her phone cut through the tension. A message. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and froze. Her stomach turned to ice. She hadn't sent that last text to Daniel. She had sent it to her husband. I still feel your hands on me. The living room was suffocatingly quiet. She stood in the middle of it, still holding her phone like it might disappear, like the message might unsend itself if she just didn't look at it too long. But it was too late. Her husband entered the room, the phone still in his hand. His face wasn't angry, not yet. That was what made it worse. He lifted his gaze slowly. Is this meant for me? She didn't answer. His voice broke, quieter this time. I still feel your hands on me. He let the sentence hang there, like it had its own weight, like it could drop through the floor. She felt her throat tighten. Her chest heaved but no air seemed to reach her lungs. It's not what you think, she whispered, knowing full well how useless those words were. He scoffed, shaking his head as he paced backward. No. Because I think my wife, just sent me a message meant for someone else. Someone who's been coming around way too often. Someone who stood in my house while I shook his hand. Silence. Then, you slept with him? His voice cracked. Not from rage. From betrayal. Her eyes welled. I didn't mean to, he took a step closer. But you did. She couldn't look at him. Her hands trembled. Her whole body did. And then, a voice from the hallway. Daniel. I'm sorry, he said, stepping into the light, his face pale, jaw clenched. It wasn't planned. It just, get out of my house. Her husband's voice was suddenly cold. Final. Daniel froze, then looked at her. But she couldn't hold his gaze either. Everything inside her felt shattered. The room pulsed with silence, like it couldn't hold what had just been spoken aloud. Something irreversible had cracked open, and none of them knew how to seal it again. Her husband turned to her one last time, eyes red, voice barely audible now. It was never supposed to happen. He grabbed his keys from the counter, walked to the door, and stepped outside, leaving it wide open behind him. And she just stood there. Frozen. Everything gone still, except for the sound of her heartbeat, pounding like thunder in her ears. The rain came softly that evening, as if the sky itself couldn't bear the weight of another loud moment. She stood alone by the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the drops trace lazy paths down the glass. The house was quieter now. Not empty, just stripped of illusion. Her husband hadn't returned since that morning. Daniel hadn't called. And maybe that silence was the clearest answer of all. She reached for her phone again, scrolling through messages that didn't exist, rereading old ones like they might offer a way back. But nothing changed. Not the words. Not the ache. Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned. Her husband stood in the doorway. Damp from the rain, eyes tired, but here. She didn't speak. He stepped forward slowly, placing a folded piece of paper on the table, a note. Not a threat. Not a goodbye. Just something between them, written in his hand. I don't know how we got here, he said, his voice worn thin. But I can't pretend I didn't see it coming. She lowered her gaze. I never meant to hurt you. A bitter smile tugged at his mouth. Meaning not to doesn't mean it didn't happen. She nodded. I know. He looked around the room, then finally back at her. I keep thinking about that version of us, the one that used to sit on the floor and eat takeout and laugh until we couldn't breathe. A tear slipped down her cheek. I miss them too. Silence again. Heavy, but not angry. Then, almost too quietly to hear, he said, I don't forgive you, not yet. She nodded again. She didn't expect him to. But I didn't come to end it, he added. I came to see if there's anything left worth saving. She took a step forward. Just one. Enough to show she was still there. Their eyes met. Tired. Fractured. But not empty. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. But something shifted. A beginning, maybe. Or at least, not the end. Outside, the rain eased.